You thought you were watching a simple family drama unfold around a dining table, but what you're about to hear is a quiet storm that has been gathering for years. I'm about to walk you through every secret, every smile, every calculated move that turned a seemingly ordinary Sunday lunch into a turning point for an entire lineage. The setting is a spacious, sunlit dining room in a house that has stood for 3 generations. Cream linen tablecloths, a polished oak sideboard, and a wall of family photographs with faded edges set the stage. It's late afternoon. The light pours through lace curtains, painting soft gold across the polished floor. The scent of rosemary and freshly baked bread drifts from the kitchen, mixing with the faint aroma of lavender from a vase in the corner. At the head of the table sits Naomi, a woman in her early 60s whose presence commands respect without needing to speak. She's dressed in a navy cardigan over a crisp white blouse, her silver hair pinned back in a neat bun. Across from her, her son Elliot, 35 and freshly shaven, leans forward, his eyes bright with anticipation. Beside him, Sage, his wife, looks pale, her makeup slightly smudged at the edges, her hands trembling just enough to betray the calm she tries to project. Naomi poured tea for everyone, a ritual she has performed countless times, a small act of control in a world that sometimes feels out of her grasp. As she placed the steaming cups before each guest, she noticed the way Sage's knuckles were white around her purse strap. The air thickened with a tension that made the silverware glint a little brighter. "Naomi," Sage began, her voice barely above a whisper, "thank you for seeing me. I need to talk, just the two of us." Her words hung like a fragile spiderweb, each strand pulling at the edges of Naomi's composure. Naomi's smile remained steady, but inside a storm was brewing. She had always believed in nurturing families, smoothing over cracks before they widened, yet here, in the safety of her own home, the cracks were already exposed. When Naomi urged Sage to sit, the younger woman's eyes flicked to the door, as if expecting an invisible audience. "I've known for a while now," Sage confessed, "that Elliot and Ember have an affair." The name Ember, the younger sister of Sage, landed in the room like a stone, sending a ripple through the once peaceful atmosphere. Naomi's expression didn't flinch. She simply set her cup down with a soft clink. "Tell me exactly what you saw." Sage swallowed, her throat working as she recounted the cafe downtown where she'd seen them holding hands, laughing, sharing a dessert that looked almost too sweet to eat. "They were intimate, Naomi. They weren't just colleagues. They were lovers." The words fell out in a rush, as if the pressure had built up for weeks, months even. Naomi felt a cold draft sweep across her shoulders despite the warm sunlight. Instead of a visceral reaction, Naomi's mind flicked into a quiet, analytical mode. She had spent decades learning how to read people, how to anticipate moves before they were made. "Are you sure?" she asked, her voice even. "Because once spoken, there's no taking it back." Sage nodded, eyes brimming with tears that seemed to threaten a cascade she refused to let fall. Naomi listened as Sage described confronting Ember, the younger woman's defiant laughter echoing in the hallway of the house. "She laughed and said it wasn't any of my business," Sage continued, and then she added that once the divorce was final, she'd make sure I got as little as possible. The ambition in Ember's eyes was no longer a vague suspicion, but a concrete, chilling plan. The room seemed to expand, the walls widening to hold the weight of betrayal. Naomi's thoughts raced through decades of marriage, of raising Elliot, of watching her husband Damon withdraw into a study, and of the growing distance between her and the woman she'd welcomed as a daughter. The betrayal was not just personal. It involved inheritance, trust funds, and property that had been safeguarded by her grandfather's careful stipulations. Naomi's calm exterior held firm as she asked, "Why are you telling me this now?" Sage's answer was simple yet profound, "Because it's wrong. Because you deserve better than this deceit. Because I love my nephew and can't watch Ember destroy everything he's built." The sincerity in Sage's voice struck a chord deeper than anger. It sparked a resolve that had been dormant for years. Instead of confronting Ember head-on, Naomi made a choice that would shape the next several months. She would play the part of the oblivious, slightly helpless mother. She would smile, she would serve the food, she would keep the conversation light, all while cataloging every hidden message, every secret rendezvous, every financial irregularity. I will act as if I know nothing, she told herself, and I will let them think they have won. The following weeks unfolded like a carefully choreographed dance. Damon, oblivious to the undercurrents, continued to bring home his favorite pot roast on Thursday evenings, his eyes briefly flickering to Ember when she arrived with a designer dress and a perfume that seemed to cling to his shirts. Naomi watched the subtle shift in his posture, the way his hand lingered a beat too long on her shoulder, the forced enthusiasm in his voice when he spoke of home repairs. She noted the new cologne, the excessive phone checking, the late-night texts that vibrated against his bedside lamp. At a family dinner 3 days later, Ember arrived wearing a silk gown that glittered under the chandelier light. She embraced Naomi with theatrical warmth, whispering, "You look wonderful, Mom." Her eyes lingered on Damon, sparkling with a mix of admiration and calculation. In a calculated move, she leaned in and placed her hand lightly on Naomi's, a gesture that seemed affectionate but carried an undercurrent of dominance. "Marriage can be so challenging after so many years," she murmured. "The spark sometimes fades." Naomi nodded, her gaze steady, her mind already noting the subtle shift in Ember's demeanor, her breath quickening whenever Damon mentioned the future. When Wade, Naomi's other son, arrived, the atmosphere shifted dramatically. Ember transformed into a model of devotion, hanging on his every word, laughing at his jokes with a practiced delight that made Naomi's skin crawl. Yet, Naomi saw the way Ember's eyes flitted toward the doorway each time Damon's car pulled into the driveway. She noted the tension that crackled between the two women, a silent battle of wits played out in glances and subtle gestures. One evening, after a particularly tense dinner, Naomi found herself alone in the kitchen. The house was quiet save for the soft hum of the refrigerator. She stood by the window, watching the roses her and Damon's joint project bloom in full red against the deep green foliage. She thought about the trust her grandfather had set up, a legal instrument that stipulated the house could never be sold or transferred outside the bloodline, even in divorce, and a rarely used clause about infidelity that could forfeit a cheating spouse's claim to the assets. This was the first time Naomi realized that the legal shield she had taken for granted might become her most powerful weapon. She consulted Patricia Chin, a sharp-witted attorney specializing in complex divorce cases. In a sleek downtown office lined with mahogany and glass, Patricia reviewed the trust documents with Naomi. "Your grandfather was forward-thinking," she observed, "and there's a clause that protects the property if the marriage ends due to adultery. It essentially means you retain full rights to the house and related assets if Damon's affair can be proven." The realization hit Naomi like a bolt of lightning. She wasn't just fighting for emotional closure, she was poised to reclaim legal ownership of the family home. Armed with this knowledge, Naomi began a silent campaign of observation. She recorded phone calls, kept tabs on Sage's text messages, and quietly gathered evidence of Ember's illicit activities. The most unsettling discovery came when Sage handed Naomi a folder filled with damning documents, a timeline of Ember's planned seduction, a copy of her grandfather's will annotated with scribbled notes about asset distribution, and a life insurance policy on Naomi that Ember had taken out 6 months earlier, naming herself as the sole beneficiary, a plan that would have allowed her to inherit a substantial sum upon Naomi's death. Naomi's mind raced. If Ember could manipulate legal loopholes to her advantage, could she also forge signatures, alter documents, engineer a false death of a family member to claim inheritance? The folder revealed that Ember had indeed been researching the effects of digitalis, a cardiac medication, on elderly relatives, a disturbing hint that she might have considered a more permanent solution to any obstacles. The narrative tension escalated when Naomi, with a calm that belied the storm within, decided to let the betrayers think they had won. She signed the divorce papers with a steady hand, her pen moving in a precise rhythm that mirrored the signatures of her younger self on the marriage certificate decades earlier. The act was symbolic, a closing of one chapter and the opening of another. She handed the documents to Richard Peton, a divorce attorney known for his polished demeanor and sharp legal mind. Peton, seated at the head of a massive mahogany conference table, presented a settlement that looked one-sided on paper. Naomi would receive a modest downtown condo, half of their joint savings, and a small alimony. Damon would keep the family home, the business, vacation properties, and the bulk of the investment portfolio. Naomi listened, her expression calm, her eyes flicking between Damon's hopeful gaze and Ember's triumphant smile. When Peton suggested that she consider the reality of managing the condo's upkeep, Naomi simply replied, "I suppose you've thought of everything." She then signed the agreement, each stroke deliberate and final. The moment the pen lifted, a palpable shift occurred in the room. Even Ember's confidence wavered for a split second, as if she sensed that something was off-kilter. Naomi's voice rose, firm and unshakable, as she addressed Damon. "This isn't just about property, it's about integrity. You may think you're walking away with everything, but you're forgetting the trust clauses that protect what's rightfully mine." The divorce filing entered the legal pipeline, and for the next 60 days, Naomi played the role of a woman ready to move on, attending church, volunteering at community events, and even planning a Thanksgiving dinner for friends. Yet, behind the scenes, she was methodically assembling a legal dossier that would expose Ember's fraud, forgery, and potential coercion. When the day finally arrived for the court hearing, the courtroom was packed with onlookers, neighbors, former colleagues, even a few of Damon's old country club friends who seemed to relish the spectacle. Naomi entered, her posture regal, her gaze steady. The judge, a stern woman with silver hair, listened as Peton presented the evidence: forged insurance policies, text messages between Ember and Damon detailing their plans, and the trust amendment that stipulated Naomi's rights in the event of adultery. The judge's eyes widened as the documents were displayed. She ruled that the marriage was dissolved due to proven misconduct, granting Naomi full ownership of the family home, the associated trust properties, and all related assets. Moreover, she ordered an investigation into Ember's financial crimes. The courtroom erupted not in cheers, but in a stunned silence that seemed to echo through the very walls. The aftermath was a mixture of relief, vindication ***, and a strange emptiness. Naomi stood on the balcony of her now reclaimed house, watching the sunrise paint the sky in hues of gold and rose. The garden she and Damon had cultivated together swayed gently in the morning breeze. For the first time in months, the only sound she heard was the distant chirp of birds. In the weeks that followed, Naomi's life took on a new rhythm. She began hosting support gatherings for women navigating divorce, using her home, a place once slated for loss, as a sanctuary. She partnered with Patricia Chin to establish a legal aid fund for survivors of financial abuse. The house, once a battleground, became a haven of hope. But the story does not end here. As winter gave way to spring, Naomi received an unexpected visitor, Sage, now engaged to Wade in a budding relationship built on mutual respect and shared trauma. They stood together in the kitchen, their hands clasped, eyes bright with future possibilities. Naomi smiled, feeling a warmth that had been foreign for years. "You both have found something genuine," she said softly, "something that can't be bought or stolen." The next chapter unfolded at a Thanksgiving dinner 6 months later. The table was laden with dishes Naomi had prepared for decades: pot roast, rosemary potatoes, honey-glazed carrots, each bite tinged with the sweetness of triumph. Around the table sat Wade, Sage, Patricia, and a few close friends. Ember and Damon were nowhere to be seen. Their absence was a quiet affirmation of the boundaries Naomi had set. During the meal, Naomi raised her glass and spoke. "This year has been one of the most difficult of my life. I lost a marriage I thought would last forever. I discovered that someone I loved was capable of unimaginable betrayal. I learned that my family was under attack from within. I also learned that I'm stronger than I ever imagined. I learned that my son is a man of integrity who chooses love over revenge. I learned that sometimes the greatest gifts come disguised as losses. I learned that family isn't just about blood. It's about people who stand by you when the world tries to tear you down. People who choose honesty over convenience, loyalty over self-interest. The room fell into a reverent hush as everyone processing her words felt the weight of her journey. Wade stood, his voice steady, to Mom, who taught us that grace under pressure isn't just a saying, it's a way of life. Patricia added, to Nain, who proved that patience and planning can overcome any adversary. Sage whispered, to New Beginnings. As the glasses clinked, a quiet realization settled over Naomi. Power isn't always loud. It can be a woman who endures, who observes, who plots with patience, and who ultimately reclaims what is rightfully hers. The house, once threatened, now stood as a testament to resilience. And so, the story of Naomi, of a woman who turned betrayal into a catalyst for empowerment, continues to ripple outward, inspiring others to see that even when the world seems stacked against you, the quiet strength of patience and truth can rewrite the ending. The story explores the quiet power of patience, the hidden strengths of a matriarch, and the ultimate justice that blooms when truth surfaces.